Hi everybody, and welcome to Nerd to the Third Power, your one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, this epic quest of awesomeness is our resident anime goddess, the Cat. Cat, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Okay. And also joining us are a pair of our correspondents, Brian and John. How are you guys doing?
I'm a little sick and tired of my apartment falling apart. But other than that, I should be alright.
I'm doing really well now that I have finally figured out this mystery of time zones.
No one understands time zones. I don't believe you.
Well, you apparently just generate time distortion fields around yourself, as our not recorded conversation revealed. So,
if I can only figure out how to use that power for good,
or evil, more likely.
I'll try good first, and then maybe evil if good doesn't work out.
And then maybe he'll just get bored and just do it for laughs. So we got a really fun show for you tonight. Tonight we are discussing The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, both the graphic novel by Don Rosa, which is amazing, and you should totally read it, and the recent heavy metal concept album released inspired by said graphic novel. And we got a special guest tonight, our own Cabo, who our longtime listeners will remember as one of our former co-hosts, has joined us tonight to discuss this awesome graphic novel, so that's going to be a lot of fun. So, but of course, you know, we cannot put the cart before the horse, so we will start our show, as we always do, with Ask a Geek. And we've got a bunch of questions here. I've got one here from about 3 or 4 different listeners here for John. Now that Maleficent is in theaters, what are your thoughts on the film, since you ranted and raved about it for so long in its lead-up?
Okay, this'll take a couple of minutes. Let me set the stage first and foremost. When I first heard that Disney was doing a Maleficent origin story, I was really, really uncertain. When they first announced it, Tim Burton was the name attached to direct it, presumably because of the incredible success he had with Alice in Wonderland for reasons that will forever escape me. But the Maleficent is basically my favorite of all of the Disney villains, and she has been ever since I was a wee little beastie. And I have this particular pet peeve with her that I was concerned about, especially when I heard a few little of the details starting to emerge. I have this pet peeve about people referring to her. Disney themselves has done this before in some of their media, most notably Kingdom Hearts, as a witch or a sorceress, because in the original story she's a fairy, and she's supposed to be a fairy in the context of Disney's movie as well, and I always have liked that she was a fairy, because in the old legends of the British Isles, fairies were not cute, and they were not something you wanted to mess around with. They were terrifyingly powerful creatures that you wanted to never ever offend, even unintentionally, because they would take disproportionately severe vengeance on you if you did. Like, say, for instance, forgetting to invite a fairy to a christening and having her curse your daughter with death as a result. And I liked that Disney Sleeping Beauty had a link back to that. I was glad when I found out that they were keeping that thread intact, so that took some of the nerves off of me. I also was nervous when I actually read a leaked script. Maybe it was stupid of me to leak it, maybe not. It said final draft on it, but when I read it, I was like, oh gosh, I really hope that's fake. As it turns out, it wasn't fake, but it was also not really the final draft, because apparently they brought in Paul Dini to do some ghostwriting on this script. It's openly acknowledged that he did it, but his credit is not on the movie anywhere. This was probably the credited screenwriter's final version. Whatever Dini did, he really, really managed to salvage it. Because the finished version, while I still felt it was really, really flawed, was also incredibly entertaining. Like, I genuinely enjoyed it. I can't fully justify why I enjoyed it. I've seen it get a lot of criticism, and I feel that a good 75 to 90% of that criticism is deserved, but I still liked it. And for as much as it did wrong, it did manage to get a fair amount right. And even though I don't see this Maleficent as the same entity that we encountered in the 1950s Sleeping Beauty movie, I at least can kind of see a sort of thread of connection between them. So, you know, I'm not as disappointed in this movie as I feared that I would be. And that's a good thing, because apparently they're already talking about possibly making a sequel. Yes, I know.
That was a painful sigh.
Stop making sequels to things that are already fucking Spin-offs, goddamn.
It sounded for a moment like her lungs were trying to strangle her heart. Okay.
Thud.
All right. Well, that sort of spins off into a related question from Tim Murphy. No relation to the Jurassic Park character. And he asked, with Maleficent now in theaters, which other Disney villains would you like to see get their own movie? And I'm going to start this off by saying I would spill the blood of 100 men and 100 times more to see James Woods' Hades.
Oh man.
Oh.
I could so picture that so easily, especially if it was just live action and they just, oh man, I could see that. Of the different movies that they could possibly make, I already know that the next planned one is Cruella. That is in the cards. It's one of those that I just kind of go, why? Because I can't really see Cruella de Vil as having a very interesting backstory. I've also seen a lot of people asking about Gaston for some reason, and I have no idea why anybody wants to see a movie about Gaston.
Gaston is not complex enough of a creature to warrant his own movie. It's not necessary.
It really isn't. All he is a very privileged, good-looking, entitled guy who flew into a homicidal rage when he didn't get what he wanted.
And we already have American Psycho.
But of the ones that have not been announced, I'm gonna pick two, because one is the one that I would most enjoy seeing, and the other is the one that I think would actually happen. The one that might actually happen, I would say, would possibly be Jafar. Because, you know, Jafar's just a cool character in general. He's a sorcerer. They probably wouldn't be bringing Gilbert Gottfried back if they did a live-action version. The man can dream.
No, I demand Gilbert Gottfried come back.
As a matter of fact,
I don't even care if it's a CGI parrot.
Oh no,
I don't care if it's just Gilbert Gottfried in a parrot suit. Gilbert
It is going to be Gilbert
Gottfried
Gottfried in a parrot suit.
needs to be in here.
And Robin Williams is the genie.
No. This is just a Jafar
Actually,
story.
the genie.
just paint Gilbert Gottfried up and have him perched on Jafar's shoulder.
Actually, if you want an interesting take on Jafar, there is a musical about Jafar on YouTube called Twisted, the Untold Story of a Royal Vizier.
Really?
And it's sort of like Wicked in its telling of Jafar's life, and it's all made up by some fans, so it's like nothing canon or anything.
Right.
But it's a really, really fantastic musical, and it parodies a lot of Disney stuff.
Oh man,
And it's really, really great. So if you want a good Jafar story, it's there. It would never make its own real movie because it's way too inappropriate, but it's really, really excellent.
I will look that up. As for the one, though, that I would most enjoy seeing a backstory for the villain, and the one that I know will never, ever happen because you could not do this character in a live-action movie, and that seems to be Disney's focus with these, I would like to see a Scar movie more than anything else. I always got the distinct impression watching The Lion King, more so than with any other villain, that Scar had a major grudge going back years, that like Scar felt like he had been screwed over and he felt like he was only taking what he was owed. And I really would like to know the full story behind that. I'd also kind of like to know how he got the scar in the first place, and you know, what they called him before he had the scar. Like, I know there were some books that were released before Lion King 2 came along and kind of retconned them out of existence, which claimed that his original name was Taka, I believe, which is
Yeah, that's what I heard.
yeah, apparently that's Swahili for trash, which really says something about his family relationships.
I have
Assholes.
a theory.
You have it? Okay.
I got a theory.
If you know that lions have a habit of stealing mates from their competitors, Sarabi was once Scar's wife, and Mufasa took his woman.
Well, yeah, I mean...
And that is how he got the scar.
I mean, if you're going by actual Lion Society arrangements, then basically all them lionesses were Mufasa's wives, which raises a lot of questions Disney doesn't want to answer regarding Simba and Nala's relationship. But
But we go there because we have absolutely no shame.
We go there because we are people on an internet podcast who overthink everything.
Because really, you only see Nala's mom.
You do? Well, technically, one could argue that you see Nala's dad, but again, this is one of those things Disney doesn't want to address.
And right back to the beginning.
It's the circle of something.
Well, I'll tell you what villain I would really like to see their own movie of, and it would probably be a CG hell to make, but Ursula.
Oh, yeah.
That needs to happen.
That would be another good one.
Because there's another thing where you know that Ursula has some sort of beef with King Triton and that she had been banished, but they never really go into explaining it, and there was rumors that they were originally going to make them like siblings or related in some way, and they never really went with it, and like that's a story that I think needs to be told.
It's true, that's a very good point, but you are right, that would be a CG nightmare.
Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I don't know. See, here's the thing. You have to always be careful when you make the villain sort of like a main character and it's about their story, because you walk this line because they're supposed to be the villain. You're not necessarily supposed to like them. Maybe you can understand them, but you're not supposed to like them. When you start to like a villain, the villain becomes an anti-hero, and I feel like at some points will sort of lose themselves and they can't really be a villain anymore. You know,
that is.
So that's why I'm not really like gonna jump headlong into like, yeah, this villain needs a movie, because like, well, might screw something up somewhere down the line.
That's kind of one of the flaws that the Maleficent movie does run into. Disney's not bold enough a company to make a story about a villain who actually is a villain. So in order to do Maleficent, they just kind of have to make her a character who kind of temporarily wanders astray and then wanders back onto the path of righteousness. And they have to turn other characters in the story into villains in order for it to work. Because, frankly, Disney isn't brave enough. I'm just going to throw that right out there. Disney isn't brave enough to actually make a story in which a genuinely evil, or at least a genuinely not so nice person is the central character. They always have to be nice deep down inside where it counts, you know? And that's why I can't even imagine a Cruella de Vil movie. Why? How can you spin that to make a sympathetic enough character to cast them as the lead? That shouldn't be possible. It's animal abuse.
Who goes on, who wants to murder puppies.
Yeah, how do you spin that?
Yeah, I mean, that's her whole thing. She's rich, she's callous, she's used to getting her own way, and she will murder puppies for her own sense of fashion.
Was it The Devil Wears Prada? Wasn't that just the Cruella de Vil movie?
I mean, do we really need another one?
Yeah, honestly, I don't see how they can push this much further. Now, I will say if they wanted to do Captain Hook or the Evil Queen, I could see either of those working. Especially the Queen, actually.
Yeah, maybe Captain Hook, because Captain Hook seems like a character is like, listen, I'm just chilling here, trying to be a pirate. This asshole over here, Peter Pan, keeps ruining it for me.
And you know what? Honestly, I don't know how much they're going to really need any of potential movies for these, because they have Once Upon a Time for this very reason.
That's true. That's true. I don't know, I think...
You want to spin the Evil Queen as a potential main character? You've already got it done.
And you ruined it at the end of the last season. Good job.
Kat, do you...
All right. Well, I think it's time for us to move on then. All right. This next one is also from the Facebook. The name says Darkent Reltnark. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. He asks us, you can only prepare for one: orc horde invasion or zombie outbreak. Which do you prepare for and why?
Orc horde.
Zombies.
Ooh,
Zombies are dumb.
Zombies are more realistic to prepare for than orcs.
Yeah, we can actually...
I mean, personally, in the real world, I'm not on an RPG or something where I'm going to be like, oh, how am I going to prepare this campaign?
Personally, in this real world that we live in, I'm going to collect myself for the zombie apocalypse that may happen.
Well,
Given some of the shit that's going on in pharmaceutical circles, maybe sooner than we think.
You never know. They could turn into orcs.
Or they could
That could be a side
zombies.
effect.
They could be
You're just trying to be the geek hipster. You want to.
I don't want to be the geek hipster. I think, in terms of if that was going to happen, which would be like the worst thing to happen, I would say orc horde, because the orc hordes are a little bit smarter. They got lots of sharp objects. Zombies are kind of slow and dumb.
Well,
they can't really climb stairs.
unless
I'll be safe in my 3rd floor apartment. Orcs have ladders and siege equipment. That's kind of scary.
Unless we're talking about Warhammer orcs, who are just smashy, smashy, blowy, blowy, everything blow up, guns, guns, bang, bang, more DACA.
Why do they have guns?
Huh?
Never mind. I don't want to know. We
They'll
don't have
kill
that
our,
much
they'll
time
kill our
left.
soldiers and then take them from them. And then they'll discover the joys of what happens when you point the noisy thing at someone else.
Well, hopefully they'll just be at each other.
Kind of like how I discovered what guns do.
In any case, John, what do you think?
You know, I'm kind of with you, Brian. I think I would be more concerned and feel like more preparation would be necessary for orcs. Because, as I've mentioned, I think when we were asked a zombie-related question before, and has been pointed out in the past by that wonderful font of all internet wisdom, cracked.com, zombie apocalypse scenarios would, in reality, fail really, really quickly. Things like scavengers, rotting flesh, adverse weather conditions, and the simple fact that is
Things like
never,
science.
Things like science, and the simple fact that is never really acknowledged in any zombie media, and that's that transferring a disease by bite is really inefficient. I believe the way Cracked put it was, hey, you remember that one time that one dog got rabies and then within a week all the dogs had it? No, neither do we. So, I feel like the zombies would kind of take care of themselves in short order, but the orcs, that would be another issue. They have brains and are not made of dead flesh.
You see, Gonzo?
It's just not realistic. Like, if I were personally going to prepare for one or the other, I'm not really expecting an outbreak of orcs, you know, in Missouri.
Well, you know, the good thing
Although,
about
to be
this
fair,
is,
if orcs were to be found, that is where they would be.
Well, I'd
Missouri?
expect fishmen or I don't know, zombies before orcs in Missouri.
I will say
I'm pretty
this.
sure orcs would probably hit Canada first.
I will say this, a lot of the same preparation and tactics would be equally effective on both. Headshots will take down both zombies and orcs.
Unless, again, we're talking about Warhammer orcs, which can absorb ridiculous amounts of damage and not even blink.
Well, apparently if we're talking about Warhammer orcs, then we're just all fucked anyway.
Pretty much! They don't call it
no
the
amount of preparation.
They don't call it the grim darkness for nothing.
I can't roll this many dice.
Okay. All right. And our last question here, again from the Facebook, this is from Zach. It is for John and Kat. What horror property do you think could work well as an anime series?
Oh, let me just say, and I don't care who in the room doesn't like it, Cabin in the Woods would make an excellent anime.
Oh, you know, I could see that. I could totally see that. In fact, I
My
could
voice
even...
just went all Mickey Mousey for a moment there. It was really creepy.
Who, me?
Like, holy yes, you.
Oh, well, I could see that. I used to be able to do better than that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, anyway.
Kat says Cabin in the Woods. John, what about you?
Let me see. I could see a couple. I'm like, right now, my brain is in like a three-way tie between Saw, Hellraiser, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Saw, I could see as a really good anthology-style horror anime series. Maybe even Nightmare, similarly. Because Saw, you know, there's so many different stories you could tell with that, so many different people that Jigsaw could capture, and so many different horrible situations they could put them in, and I could easily see the anime style working really, really well for that, because it would work with the really over-the-top violent death traps, and anime loves nothing if not going into characters' pasts and psyches and exploring how they get to these situations. I could easily see someone crawling around trying to slip through barbed wire and having a flashback to like his 10th birthday party and how it led to this moment in an anime so easily. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, Kat.
Not to mention, they would up the violence and the grossness of it.
Exactly,
because that's what I love so much about anime and manga is that there's really no limitations to how horrible something can be because you're not limited by the capabilities of special effects or practical effects.
Nope.
You can draw whatever you want, and that is also the horrifying part.
Case in point, Hellsing. Everybody in the Hellsing universe has incredibly high blood pressure. It just explodes out of them.
For my part, I thought they'd already made a Saw anime. They just called it Higurashi no Nakukoroni.
Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, there is that.
Except like way more like lowly elements, but otherwise, yeah.
As for Nightmare, I could see it with like, especially number 3, the Dream Warriors. They could build up like this team of kids trying to fight back against Freddy using dream powers, and I could see that being an interesting story arc. And as for Hellraiser, I'd love to see the anime version of Pinhead's Hell, Cenobite's Hell, rendered, because it's not something that's really been given much exploration in the official movies, except for the second one, their version of Hell, and that was really kind of a letdown in my opinion. I could see all of that anime excess going to incredibly good use when combined with that nightmarishness, so I don't know. I think Saw is the most easily workable, but I could easily see the other two as well.
Your diary is bound in flesh and screams when exposed to sunlight, isn't it?
It's the original. It's the original Facebook. You can't see me. You can't see me.
Your nightmare idea sounds like one of those Super Sentai shows.
It really does.
I was gonna say, oh my god, like kids banding together, like, and one of them's wearing all red, and this wearing all green, and then they form like a giant mecha.
It was almost like that in the Dream Warriors. Every kid, they were being taught by the survivor of the original, Nancy, I think was her name, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, how to like control their dreams. She was teaching them like some lucid dreaming techniques, and every one of them had a specific superpower in the dream world related to something in their lives, and I could so see that as being like a Super Sentai thing. I really easily could.
Yeah, see, their super suits would somehow reflect some part of their past, and then they would turn into a giant mecha. The most important thing is that they turn into a giant mecha.
And somewhere in the point of the show, they turn into a giant mecha, and there's a giant explosion, and you don't look at it.
And they have to fight like Freddyzilla.
Yeah, exactly. They turn into
this.
some giant version of himself that's really scary.
Quick, someone get Toei on the phone. We have an idea.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm wondering why hasn't Sci-Fi made this into a TV show yet?
Because they would ruin it.
Well, it's not like they haven't ruined everything else they've touched. And God knows they've had crazier shows on their network.
You know, I'm just gonna put this out there, that there probably is doujinshi of everything we've just talked about already. We just need to go to one of the markets or something and find some fan comics, because it probably already exists.
But first we're going to have to wade through all of the Freddy Jason / comics.
Just threw up in my mouth a little.
Just the idea of that makes me feel like I need to go to confession. And I'm not even Catholic.
Okay.
And now he's become Pennywise.
I can't help it.
Brian, how do you feel sitting next to a psychopathic clown?
It's all float.
I want to go home now.
Damn it, I'm already home.
Shit.
Hide now.
I need to go into my dream world and get my giant mecha.
Alright, well, that's all the Ask the Geek questions that we have. As always, you can send them to us through the Facebook at... Huh?
I said, oh, thank God.
Yeah, that's all the Ask the Geek questions we have for this week. As always, you can send them to us through the email at billysmith@channelawesome.com, or drop them in the That Guy with Glasses forum thread of the same name. Or if you're one of our Facebook faithful, producer Tom has starting threads on our Facebook to take Ask a Geek questions. So, yeah, you can drop them there as well. That's all the Ask Geek questions that we have for this week, so we're just jump right into our news segment, starting this week with John. So John, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. Gonzo. Without further ado, let's dive into the movie bin and see what we've got this week. We begin today with one of the more long-standing questions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Ever since that mid-credits teaser in the Avengers, we've known that Thanos, the Mad Titan, had a big role to play in the comic book movies. But we've now had 3 Marvel movies without so much as a peep heard out of the death-loving alien, and the biggest mystery of them all has been simply who was going to play him in future films. It looks like that mystery might be put to rest, as Latino Review broke the news last week that it looks like Josh Brolin will be portraying Thanos in Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, he'll be providing his voice at least. Does that mean that Thanos will be CG? That another actor with a more imposing physical build will be actually playing him? Something else entirely? Damned if I know. I'm just excited that we're actually going to get him taking a semi-active role in the continuity already. 3 movies is a long time to wait for the payoff from a credit bonus. But if things are going to develop in the Marvel Cinematic Universe the way they look to be, we might have a longer wait yet to see Thanos truly come into his own. Speaking of Marvel characters we might not be seeing for a while, things are starting to look shakier and shakier for Ant-Man. Despite Marvel's determination that the film will still be released on schedule, one of the factors which actually drove Edgar Wright away from the project, they seem to keep repeatedly striking out on finding a new director to take the helm. The rumor mill had it for a while that Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn was being prepped by Marvel to sit in another director's chair, but Gunn himself quickly shot those rumors down on Twitter. Then it seemed that Anchorman director Adam McKay was a shoo-in for the job, but for reasons which remain unknown, he removed himself from the roster, a decision which he reportedly made on his own, not a call made by Marvel. Now it seems the studio has lost yet another potential director they were looking at, Rawson Thurber, the man who brought us We're the Millers. Why does it seem like they're so focused on comedy directors for Ant-Man? Could this have something to do with the mysterious creative differences that Marvel and Edgar Wright had over the film? Well, I can't really say other than raising that incredibly dubious bit of personal speculation there, but I will say this. Marvel needs to find somebody, and fast, if they're going to get this one out on time. Otherwise, they might have to actually postpone it, and that would frankly mean they've lost a promising director like Edgar Wright for no good reason. Of course, it's not all bad news for the Marvel directorial department. After a lot of rumors and speculation, it would seem that at long last Doctor Strange has found its man. And that man would be Scott Derrickson. Now, those of you who don't watch many horror movies might mostly be familiar with that name via the disastrous 2008 remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still. But those of us who are into the creepy cinema know Derrickson best for movies like The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister. Seems like a perfect choice for the world of the Sorcerer Supreme to me. I, for one, can't wait to see what Derrickson will do with the material. Just let's hope that Keanu Reeves doesn't wind up as Stephen Strange. No offense meant to Mr. Reeves, of course. I mean, I've heard you're actually one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. I just don't think that the Marvel Universe is quite ready for the whoa factor that you'd bring to Doctor Strange. And as long as we keep talking about directing announcements, let's look away from Marvel for a bit and look towards a long time ago and a galaxy far, far away. I've already reported that, in addition to the new trilogy currently being prepped by J.J. Abrams, there are at least 3 confirmed Star Wars spin-offs in the works at Disney. Speculation has been running rampant for a while about what the subjects of these flicks would actually be, and at long last, the rumor mill has finally been rewarded by having one of its suspicions confirmed. We know now, officially, that the first Star Wars Solo movie will, indeed, be a solo movie. And we know who will be directing it. Josh Trank, who previously brought us Chronicle and is currently working on the Fantastic Four reboot for 20th Century Fox, has been announced as the director of the Han Solo movie. And he's already told the world that he's bringing at least one of his frequent collaborators along for the ride. Michael B. Jordan, the actor who was most recently the focus of a whole lot of "I'm not racist" but tirades from fans who were upset over his casting as Johnny the Human Torch Storm, is so far the only actor attached to the Solo movie. Sorry guys, I'm not tired of that gag yet, so get used to it. But who is he playing? No official word on that yet, but the popular speculation is that he just might be taking on the role of a young Lando Calrissian. Of course, that opens up a rather huge can of worms in and of itself. If that's really the route they're going with, who in the world could convincingly fill Harrison Ford's shoes as a young Han? I don't know the answer to that question yet, but as long as it's not Shia LaBeouf, I'll probably be okay with it. And lastly, we end on a more serious note tonight. It's often been said that life imitates art. Fiction has often inspired people to act, to create new technologies, or to try to enact lasting change in the world. And sometimes fiction can inspire entirely new methods of protest and political activism. That's the current situation in Thailand right now, a country which is unfortunately no stranger to government oppression. Facing strict control and stringent curfews from the military junta, Thai protesters have adopted a new symbol of peaceful protest straight from popular culture: the three-finger salute of the downtrodden peoples of Panem from the Hunger Games. Something about the situation of the dystopian novel/movie series' 12 districts has definitely resonated with the Thai populace, and even the government is aware of both the symbol's origin and meaning. Their response is typically nonsensical from a censorship point of view. They will not arrest an individual making the gesture, but if it's a group of 5 or more who are doing it, they will intervene and possibly incarcerate the offenders. An awfully severe reaction to the simple act of raising 3 fingers toward the air, but it definitely shows that the junta fears the same thing that the capital behind the Hunger Games did: that a little hope is fine, but a lot is dangerous. At least for them. And so, say I, may it always be for petty dictators, power-mad militaries, and fear-mongering oppressors everywhere, both in reality and in fiction. And on that somewhat somber note, that's it for your movie news. Now I turn things back over to my colleagues. Take it away, guys.
Thank you. We start these multiverse headlines with the law this time. And no, this isn't about the Superman case, which is over for now. This is actually over to the Jack Kirby estate and their case against Marvel, headed up by the same lawyer that was in charge of the Superman copyright case. The recent update is a bit of a surprise in that the case is actually being reviewed by the Supreme Court. Now, when I mean reviewed, I mean the court is looking over the case and the decisions of the lower courts before determining if they will hear it. There is a chance they will agree with the following decisions and then pass on the hearing, which means Marvel gains all the rights to the characters Jack Kirby created and so on. But the same can be said for the other way around. Currently, no one really knows which will happen at the moment. There seems to be implications for this case, to be sure. A write-up on Bleeding Cool gives a breakdown of what this could mean for forms of employment. There will be just 2 forms of employment. One, an employee, which you work and your work then belongs to the company. And 2, freelance contractors, in which you work for yourself, and then any work you do must be transferred to the company by a contract. There's no third option, which is a lot of freelancers actually kind of work under right now and worked under back in the day. With those 2 setups, it's the same that basically a freelancer would be able to keep his items unless he made an explicit agreement with the company to sell them over. But also as a freelancer, you lose all your privileges that you would get if you were just an employee, i.e. insurances and benefits and such like that. So it is sort of a two-edged sword. Now, Jack worked under the 1909 copyright, which means that only an employee could also do made-for-work hire, not a freelance. The made-for-work hire is that third sort of employment that the companies and the publishers sort of use. So, while longtime collaborator Stan Lee was an employee of Marvel, Kirby may actually not have been. And as such, rights and financials of the character owed to Jack Kirby and the Jack Kirby estate could also lead to a possible mass shift in other character credits and reimbursement. Too long? Didn't read? If this gets heard by the Supreme Court and they side with the Kirby estate, it changes pretty much everything. We'll see if it does. Announced the Viva Hollywood reporter, Deathlock will be starting his very own ongoing series from Marvel. Fresh off his small screen debut, Deathlock will be getting a new ongoing title, along with a new look that closely resembles that of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. But he will be a different character than of the show. The series will be handled by Nathan Emerson, who has been getting a lot of new titles as of late, along with artist Mike Perkins, who is considered a big fan of the Deathlock character. The series will debut in October, but there will be a short story that's sort of a lead into the book in this week's Original Sins #1. Well, that's all the news I have for you right now. A lot of cons are coming up, so everyone's sort of holding back until we get to those big moments, and then surprise news will be flooded inwards. And hopefully I'll bring them here right to you. But that's it for the Multiverse headlines. Over to anime news with Kat. Kat, take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Canadian voice actress Kristen Bishoprick passed away April 15th due to lung cancer. She was best known for her numerous roles in the Sailor Moon dub, where she played Zoe Sight, Emerald, Kaori Knight, and Talulu. She also had a number of small roles on television shows, including The West Wing, Nikita, and Warehouse 13. She was 50 years old. The Naruto spin-off manga Rock Lee and his ninja pals will be ending in the August issue of Shueisha's Saikyo Jump magazine. The spin-off by Taira Kenji has been running since 2010 and will end in an extra-long chapter hitting shelves July 4th. The Attack on Titan No Regrets spin-off manga will also be ending soon. The final chapter, which will include a clear illustrated file and color pages, will end in the August issue of Kodansha's Aria magazine on June 28th. The prologue issue that debuted last September caused the magazine to sell out in a week, and the first compiled volume has over 500,000 copies in print in Japan and will release in the US later this month. And while those manga are ending, there's a few new things to get excited about. Mag Garden's monthly Comics Blade magazine is launching a new Psycho Pass manga based on the 2012 cyberpunk anime series of the same name. There's already a spin-off manga dedicated to the lead character titled Inspector Tsunemori Akane, which has over 380,000 copies in print. Presumably, the new manga will follow the events of the original series. The Psycho Pass 2 anime series will debut this October, which will not only appease us fans who severely enjoyed the first season, but give additional material for the manga adaptation. The new manga will start June 30th. Shueisha's Jump SQ magazine has announced details about Watsuki Nobuhiro's upcoming 2-part Rurouni Kenshin manga. We've known for a little while that he would be putting his embalming manga on hold to publish a short story on one of the villains, which we knew would be about Shishio Makoto, which actually makes sense with him appearing in the live-action film coming out in August. Now we know that the story will be specifically about the meeting of Shishio and his lover Yumi, and the founding of his group, the Jupongatana. The first issue will hit streets July 4th. Seriously hoping it gets licensed in the US, and given the popularity of the franchise, it could totally happen and it would be really amazing. Only time will tell. Tiny bit of manga history unfolding, the Attack on Titan manga has finally unseated One Piece on the Oricon sales charts. For the first time in 5 years, One Piece is not the best-selling manga in Japan for the first half of the year. Attack on Titan took the lead, and by a lot. At the time of the ranking, from November 18th to May 18th, Attack on Titan has sold over 8.3 million copies, with One Piece at almost 5 million copies. Attack on Titan has sat safely at number 4 for the past several years, but nearly doubled its sales from the same period last year. The other top sellers were Kuroko's Basketball at number 3, Naruto at number 4, and Magi at number 5. The Crunchyroll online streaming service has now been added to the Google Chromecast app list, so if you have a tablet or a smartphone in a Wi-Fi spot, you've got Crunchyroll on any TV with an HDMI port. I've been waiting for this since the Chromecast came out, so I'm pretty stoked. Crunchyroll also recently became available on the PlayStation Vita. And finally, online retailer Right Stuff is reporting that some customers who have purchased the limited edition Blu-ray DVD combo box set of Attack on Titan Part 1 are having trouble with scratches on discs and skipping episodes. They're aware of the problem and are working with Funimation to look into the issue. If your copy came damaged, you're encouraged to contact Right Stuff's customer care team. That's all I've got going on in the anime and manga world. I'll kick it over to you, Dr. Gonzo.
All right, thank you, Kat. Well, there certainly is a lot to talk about in the gaming world this week because of E3, so much that we're actually going to devote an entire episode to it. Come back next week for our annual E3 blowout. And with that, that's all the headlines we have for this week. We're going to take a quick musical break. When we come back, Cabo is going to be here to talk with us about the life and times of Scrooge McDuck, both the Don Rosa graphic novel and the recent heavy metal concept album. Stay tuned, we got a lot of fun stuff ahead.
As hard as I try with all my might, I cannot count all of the stars in the sky. So I'll just look up at all the small lights and wonder at how there's so many tonight. As hard as I wish I can't touch them or hold them with my bare hands. As hard as I try, they're just like water that runs through my fingers and grasp. Water that runs through my fingers and hands. As hard as I try, I can't carry water with my bare hands. As hard as I wish, with all my might, I can't make you love me forever tonight. I can't make you love me forever tonight. I can't carry water. I can't carry you. As hard as I try. As hard as I try, my hands can't bring down all of the stars in the sky to light your way back to be by my side. I can't make you love me forever tonight. I can't make you love me forever
All right, and we are back. And this week we are discussing something that I'm really excited about because two things that I really, really love have come together, much like chocolate and peanut butter makes a delicious Reese's Cup, to make an awesome story and concept album. The band leader of the band Nightwish has put out a concept album based on the life and times of Scrooge McDuck, a thoroughly amazing graphic novel, which if you haven't read it, shame, go find it and do so. And we thought that it would be a fun discussion to look back on the graphic novel and compare it with the album and see how the two mesh together, and basically just look over Scrooge McDuck in general as one of the most awesome Disney characters. And we also thought that it would be fun to have a bit of a reunion. We have our former co-host Cabo here with us, and he is quite possibly the biggest fan of Life and Times that has walked this earth, save for the creator himself. So, Cabo.
No, I don't. That is a bold statement. There are Duck fans out there who are far more obsessed. And yes, Don Rosa is one of them. He is like the upper echelon of crazy Duck fans, and I love him for it.
Yes.
Like God tier Duck fan.
He is God tier Duck fan.
Yes. Cabo was actually the one who introduced me to Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck when I worked for him at Twilight Zone Comics.
Yeah, something I kept on saying was like, it is the greatest book ever written. Like, and I'm almost like half serious about that.
I speak no hyperbole. that the first person I met at Twilight Zone was Sarah, and Cabo was the second. And when I mentioned to Cabo that Sarah was putting together a required reading list for me to read to work at the comic book store, he threw this book at me with the force of a football quarterback. He said, read it. So, Kevin, you've actually brought a guest with you here today.
I have. Much like Batman has his Robin, I have my Sammy here. She is our table assistant at Interbank Studios. She is the second in command only to Sarah over here, and she is also, I would dare say she's probably a bigger Duck fan than I am, although she's not quite, I don't know. I'm more of the trivia nut, but she's the more like, I snuggle with plushies at night.
I also have an entire bookshelf of like the German Duck comics, so
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the European Duck comics are another discussion in and of
Yes.
themselves. But.
Well, let's start in by discussing the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, the graphic novel. I would say, it has to guess to say, fully canon telling of Scrooge's life from his childhood in Scotland up into becoming the richest duck in the world and uniting with Donald and Huey and Dewey and Louie. Very comprehensive story. It covers pretty much all of Scrooge's life. But, Cabo, weren't the seeds for this story were actually laid years before Don Rosa even came along, weren't they?
That is correct. Well, Don Rosa got his start as like a fan artist, and so he did a lot. But he was a big Carl Barks Duck fan, and before he set out to do this thing, he thoroughly researched, and he made sure and not just with the Duck history, because he took bits and pieces of Scrooge's life from those Carl Barks comics, which for those of us in the audience who aren't big, who don't know Duck comics, Carl Barks was basically the creator of Scrooge McDuck, and he was the Duck artist. In the 40s, 50s, etc., and is like the god of Don Rosa is like his second, but he is the god of the Duck comic.
So Don Rosa is Jesus and Carl Barks is Yahweh.
Yes, that is apt, I would say. Yeah. So basically, he went through all of Barks everything Carl Barks had ever had to say in the comics about Scrooge's life, and then basically just created this book based on that information. But on top of that, he wasn't just meticulous about that. He was also really if there are any historical figures that Scrooge meets in this book, he took the time to make sure that particular historical figure was in that part of the country where Scrooge is at during that point in the story. So not only is it Duck accurate, it's as historically accurate as you can get and still have ducks and dog-nosed people. It's pretty fantastic. It's a really thorough. And if you get a chance, I am hoping the book currently is out of print for Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, but several versions that have come out have included notes that Don Rosa
wrote, I believe is the word you're looking for. Wrote.
Yes. I get so excited that I can't talk. But he has basically notes for everything, and he says okay, well here's this, and this is where it's from, and it's an amazing read if you're a trivia junkie like me. And I'm hoping Fantagraphics currently has the rights to Don Rosa's run on the Duck comics, and I'm hoping that they do a really nice re-release of Life and Times. But right now they're starting with Son of the Sun and doing his other non-Life and Times comic stuff. But crossing fingers, because we need this book back in print like nobody's business.
It's kind of funny, going back and rereading this to prepare for this podcast, I realized that I had kind of a connection to this book before I'd even read it, because when I was a little child, I remember I had an Uncle Scrooge comic where it ties up the plot thread of Soapy Slick and the receipt for the loan.
Oh, yep.
And I actually still have that comic somewhere. And when I was rereading the book and I became that point in the story, I was like, wait a minute, this continues elsewhere. I have where this story ends, and I felt kind of special.
That's what's kind of amazing about it, because obviously Don Rosa's own stuff continues a lot of the stuff from this, but you can read Life and Times, and then you can go back and read the Barks comics, and you get to see how a lot of the stuff it's not left open in that what the heck's happening, but you get to see how it kind of ties up anyway. They introduced Flintheart Glomgold, which for those of you who are DuckTales fans, you remember Flintheart was Scrooge's nemesis in the cartoon, but you get to see their first meeting in this book, and of course it ties up later with what they do. And same thing with the Beagle Boys, you get to see his first confrontation with the Beagle Boys, and those characters. What else am I forgetting that really obviously the first time he meets Goldie, which Don Rosa is a huge Glittering Goldie Scrooge McDuck ship. He ships them so hard. For those who haven't read the book, I feel I don't know who. I know everyone on this podcast has read it, but I don't know if anyone who's listened to it. But
We'll be breaking the book down to its component parts in a bit, but first, for all of us here who have read the graphic novel, I know John fortunately missed out. He will spend a week in the Pain Glove as penance. But
I already have a recliner in there.
But for those of you,
Choice it. Not helping anything.
but for those of you, for those of us who have read it, what were your guys' general thoughts on this book? Brian, let's start with you.
Believe it or not, this is actually one of the first times I actually read the book itself, because was not lucky enough to get it when I think Boom Studios re-released it for a while before they unfortunately lost the license again. So I didn't get a chance to pick those up. So this was the first time I actually got to read all the way through it. And I can now understand why when people would mention what's your favorite book or what's your favorite comic book, this sort of comes up on a lot of people's lists. It's just a really wonderfully told story. Sure, it's about, ducks, but doesn't matter because it's still a wonderfully written story all the way through. I can see why it has a Will Eisner Award as well.
Kat, what about you?
I didn't grow up with any of the comics or anything, but I did grow up with like DuckTales and the other cartoons. So it was really surprising to me how good the comics were, and just how satisfying it is to get a backstory for all of these characters. It's really, really awesome.
For me, like I said, this is one of my favorite graphic novels ever. And I will always trumpet until the day I die that every time I read this book, it reaffirms what 4chan taught me so many years ago: you don't fuck with McDuck.
And what I really, really, really like about it is that it's really like an epic rise and fall and redemption story. You get to see how he goes from this little scrapper, this little kid, and all the stuff he goes through, and then kind of how it corrupts him. It's kind of what the prequel trilogy for Star Wars wishes it could be, in that it just, you get to really see how this character just lives his life and how he builds his worldview, giving up family and love and all these things for money, and then realizing it kind of eats you inside, and then basically he has that and then to redeem yourself. Even when I was watching DuckTales, but then reading the Carl Barks books, I always thought that basically Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie saved Scrooge's soul, and to have that kind of depth in a comic about adventuring ducks is just amazing. Yes, and I would like to yield the floor to Sammy because she's a fangirl. I can see it.
No, I also grew up with DuckTales and stuff, and I didn't know about this book until last year, and then I also came to the same conclusion that it's amazing and wonderful. But also, I kind of also a shipper of Goldie and Scrooge, and I really like that aspect of it, and how DuckTales kind of ruined that, because I thought that Goldie was going to be this kind of stick in the mud kind of thing as what DuckTales portrayed her as, and then when reading the comics, it's whoa, she's actually really amazing and wonderful and totally perfect for Scrooge, but then he can't have her. And then that just kind of dwells into another topic of what if he actually did stay with Goldie and not go for the riches. But, yeah. Yeah, no,
I have a weakness for unrequited love. The whole Scrooge Goldie thing, narrative is really it hits some personal spots, because that's just it's sweet and melancholy, but also it just feels. I just said that. I'm sorry.
All right, well, I think our listeners might be getting a little bit lost here, so before we go any further, I think we should give a brief synopsis of the story that this book tells. A mighty task, to be sure, but I'm sure that we are up for it. So, Kayla and Sammy, why don't you give us a brief rundown of the story of Life and Times of Scrooge?
Sure. Okay, well, basically, it literally is... It's basically vignettes of the various turning points in Scrooge McDuck's life, and it starts basically when he gets his lucky dime as a young boy in Glasgow, 1877. Basically, his dad kind of pulls a trick on him where it's actually he's in Scotland and the guy gives him an American nickel, and so it's useless. But he when he gets and he feels tricked, and he decides that I'm not going to let anyone cheat me anymore. I'm going to be tougher than the toughies and sharper than the sharpies, and I'll make my money square. And that kind of that's the seed of what'll be his lifelong philosophy. And yeah, so you go and it touches on that. It talks about a good chunk of the first half of the story is mostly him in America trying to make his fortune. So, you know, you fast forward to 1880, and he's, you know, his life on the riverboat with his uncle, I believe.
Yes.
His uncle.
Yeah, you get to see a lot of his other family members too, which is really cool.
And his ancestors as well.
And his ancestors.
Yeah. So you do the riverboat thing. You get to like see how he learned some of his tricks and how he toughens up and becomes a total, you know, badass duck. He spends time in the Old West and meets up with Teddy Roosevelt, which again, Don Rosa did the research to make sure that yes, actually, Teddy Roosevelt was in that part of the country in 1882, which is just amazing. I'm a total nerd for that kind of thing. And yeah, so like his you know, trying to the stuff he does in the West, how he gets his survival skills. The big part of his life where he makes most of his fortune is, or he starts to make his fortune, is as a 49er in the, or I don't know if it's not 49, but he digs for gold in the Klondike. So basically, you go through some stuff like where he goes back to Scotland and does some family-related things. I don't want to spoil. I want to tell a little story, but and then he goes back to the Klondike, and that's where you find out where he makes his fortune. Then basically, after he's started to build his fortune, it then becomes his decline, like how he becomes obsessed with money and with getting gold, and you know, and he kind of sacrifices his family for that. And like, you know, you basically go with him on that journey through his life.
To the point where like, when he said that he's going to be smarter than the Smarties and like that whole speech, he kind of goes against that.
Yeah. So yeah. So basically, there's a point, like there's the turning point in Scrooge's life where he actually engages in one reprehensible act, and without spoiling it, he basically goes against his philosophy that he's going to, like, you know, make his gold square. And basically at that point, like, his family life falls apart. He basically gives up family and love for his fortune, and then it all falls apart from there. You know, it culminates in being redeemed by Huey, Dewey, and Louie and Donald. So basically, to sum it up, it's, you know, he gets his #1 dime, builds his fortune, and then it ends with his first meeting with Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And again, so basically, it's the rise and fall and rise again of Scrooge McDuck. It's a biopic of the world's richest duck. Something else I really like about it, I hope I'm not going too far off topic, one thing I think is really cool about this book, and it's also the reason why I like Watchmen so much, is that it's not ashamed of being a comic book. I mean, it's a biopic, it's an epic story, but it fully utilizes all those comic conventions, because you get a lot of comics that really want to, like, clearly they really want to be movies. You know what I'm saying? Like they use a lot of like really cinematic storytelling, and almost they're kind of embarrassed to engage in those comic kind of tools and conventions and stuff. But you know, Don Rosa and in this book, it's totally a comic book, and he's not ashamed of it. And to me, I think that's, as a lover of comics, that makes it really exciting and awesome for me. So it wasn't too thorough there.
That's all right. What about the rest of you guys? What were your guys' general thoughts on the story, and what were some moments that particularly stood out to you?
Well, for me, I thought one of the most interesting parts of the story was the turning point for Scrooge, where he just becomes mean. Where, you know, up until this point, he's had a moral code that he lives by, and he just sort of, you know, likes and respects people. And then he's just been screwed over one too many times, and he's like, you know what, fuck it. That's it, I'm done. And you just see this, like, just that whole, like, breaking of any hope that he had to be, like, a super good person for his whole life.
I also really love that because, like, with that point, you can kind of see what could have been Scrooge, but, like, in Flintheart Glomgold. Because Glomgold is basically, like, he's trying to be Scrooge, but screwing over everyone. So it's just kind of that one moment where it's like, you can almost see him being Glomgold, and it's kind of scary.
If he had gone down that path even further, he could have been Flintheart Glomgold. Yeah, I totally get that. And also, like, a bit of Bart's trivia also is the whole thing with, like, when he engages in that act, there's payback for that later. Like, there's a very early Carl Barks story where there's payback for that act. I mean, obviously there's the cost he has to pay in, like, sacrificing family and companionship and stuff, and his moral code. But there's actually like, going to attack me now because I screwed this guy over.
Would it make things easier for you, Kevin, to talk about this if I lifted the spoilers restriction, which doesn't exist anyway?
Well, I don't know. I'm hoping that people listen to this and be like, crap, I want to read that. Like, you know. So I don't know. Yeah, whatever. It's basically, it's a zombie. A zombie comes after him because of this whole thing. But actually it comes after Donald because Scrooge was young and he kind of put back his sideburns. So to the zombie, he looks like Donald. So basically, the Donald in an early Bark story, the zombie shows up looking for Donald and to curse him. So I guess really it's not Scrooge who gets payback for that. It's Donald who gets payback. And Scrooge, oops.
Brian, what about you? What were some standout moments for you for the story?
It's kind of funny he brought that up because going through and reading the book, it's funny that there's almost, I guess, a supernatural element. Like when he visited Africa for the first time and kind of goes into the cave, like I really sort of enjoyed this because it was, one, it's really good foreshadowing of the story that's sort of going to come and happen in the future and where it sort of leads up to. And it's something kind of neat and you wouldn't really expect from this book to have sort of that angle to it. And then you mentioned the zombie. What was Bombi the zombie? I believe his name was?
Yep.
Yeah, having him show up for vengeance of the Voodoo tribe and then literally chasing like Scrooge for years on end, even on the sinking Titanic. And I was like, this is magnificent. I want to read more about this.
The historical bits are especially awesome, like when he meets Teddy Roosevelt earlier in the story, and then he meets him again as President Roosevelt in 1902, and basically it's Scrooge McDuck single-handedly versus the Army and Navy of 1902, and he wins.
He had help from his family. But yeah, mostly Scrooge.
Mostly. Well, there's a lot of moments where, Scrooge is just, lays down the hurt on, like in the Klondike, and he shows up and people start, trying to cheat him, and he just, the way Don Rosa, lays that out, where it's just, no one really knows the events of that day, but, they say a hurricane came through and, people were blowing out windows, and someone could have sworn they saw a grand piano go off the roof, we don't know what caused it, but some people say they saw a duck. It's so much fun. I love that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of moments where Scrooge gets to be a supreme badass.
I think my favorite moment of him being a badass is where he goes to heaven and gets kicked out. Back.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. He just go to heaven and gets kicked out. There is that bit.
You can't be here. You can be alive longer. And I love how that whole scene plays out too, because it's because they read it, his ancestors read into the future, and it's he's going to be rich. And Scrooge is wait, what? And then they just kick him out. I just can't know yet. That's a spoiler.
Yeah, wait, he's going to be the world's greatest adventurer. I'm we don't care. He's also going to be a really penny-pinching tightwad who doesn't let anyone have any money. Oh, great!
For me, the moments that really stand out, and one of them actually led to one of Scrooge's badass moments, the one where he pulls a Samson on the steamboat, on the steam pipes. But it's the moments where we see Scrooge interacting with and reacting to his family. The two that really stand out are, again, the scene on the steamboat where he's chained up and he finds out from Soapy Slick reading his letters that his mother has passed away.
Oh, that wrecked
that was
me.
brutal.
That was really messed up.
Yeah, that still gets me misty-eyed. But the one that really gets the waterworks going for me is the scene where they're leaving Scotland for the last time, and Scrooge and his sisters think that their father is still asleep, but they look up and they see him waving, and they're wondering who's waving with him, and it turns out that it's the ghosts of their parents bidding them goodbye before they go up into the afterlife.
Yeah.
And that just wrecks me to this day.
Well, I was okay with, I get a little bit, but what wrecks me the most in this book is that point where, his sisters are we're going to leave now. If you want to come after us, you can either come after us and keep your family, or you can have your riches, but you can't have both. And they walk out the door, and he almost, and Don Rosa is notorious. He does this a lot with Goldie and, a lot of the side stories, where, Scrooge has that option to actually embrace, I can have love, I can have family, but he just either he chooses money, or he thinks oh, whatever, that Goldie doesn't care, this person doesn't care. I only need to take care of myself. I don't need them. And you realize had you gone after them, you could have had love and happiness, but instead, so just no, Scrooge, don't do it. Or oh no, they're walking out. Oh God, and they're crying.
After them, Scrooge, go after them.
Yeah, just go after them. That's all you have to do. It would be so easy.
But Scrooge totally deserved that kick from Donald.
He totally deserved the kick in the ass.
Let's talk a little bit about the Goldie story, because that's one of the most popular stories in the Duck fandom based on my research, and also one of the most divisive as well. So give us a bit of a brief rundown about the Scrooge Goldie story.
Okay, well, one of the very earliest Carl Barks Scrooge comics was a story called Back to the Klondike, where basically Scrooge for one reason or another he's losing his memory, so like he gets prescribed memory pills. So he's taking them. He suddenly remembers that he has a huge gold cache up in the Klondike from when he doing things there, and he basically recounts the story of, oh yeah, like let me tell you how this happened. I was up there and I was getting my fortune, and this dance hall girl like ripped me off and tried to steal it. I fought my way through the bar to get it back, and I fought my way through to get it back and to teach her a lesson about how hard people work. Like he basically, and I love how this doesn't count as reprehensible, but like I guess it's payback. But he kidnaps Goldie and brings her to his dig site. What would you call it? Like
his claim.
Yeah,
Claim.
And basically he makes her the two of them dig for gold together. And in the Bark story, like you just see fine, whatever, and like you've learned your lesson, you can go now, and he pays her with like what 50 cents,
Yeah.
and she throws it in his face like I dug more than you tightwad, and they then leaves, and according to that story, you never see them again. But Don Rosa actually does a lot of supplementary stuff where you find out what was going on at that point while they were living together and digging for gold, and how their relationship kind of grows. Like it's a kind of a weird Stockholm syndrome kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
They fall in love, but they never quite like.
They don't.
They're both very stubborn. They're both very stubborn, aggressive people, and so they keep butting heads. They never make themselves vulnerable enough to confess to each other how they really feel. So basically, you have this big story of unrequited love between two very ambitious and stubborn ducks.
And it's very clear that they love each other too, because there are moments where like Scrooge or Goldie will have thoughts of, oh, I guess he's okay, she's okay, and then something happens and they're like, no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So now I feel bad for bringing this up, because for the purpose of this discussion, I only had my staff read the main graphic novel. I didn't give them any of the B chapters.
No,
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to have to fix that after this is done.
I guess so. I mean,
Because there's two Goldie stories in the companion, and those two stories are the two songs that are on the CD. So it's kind of important.
yeah, because they touch on Goldie very briefly in the actual Life and Times book. The supplemental stories, again, they talk about their time in the Klondike. They talk about like
The 30 days in the cabin.
the 30 days in the cabin. Wow. And yeah, like yeah, and I guess I'm not sure how you'd say I guess it's contentious in the fact that Europe doesn't seem to recognize it. Like they don't really.
Oh yeah, Europe does not like Goldie, or like I should say specific parts of Europe does not like Goldie. Like I believe it's like Italy and France and something. I know Germany and Finland like really love Goldie, but they're kind of split, and that's why we have Brigitte. But that's a different
that's
topic.
another thing. Yeah, we can have a whole other discussion about European duck comics.
Yeah.
But I will say that like. Whereas in this country, like really only like the hardcore like comic nerds really care about duck books.
Yeah.
In Europe, they're huge. They're crazy. You can go to a grocery store and buy like what are they called? Like
They're called Lustiges Taschenbuchen in Germany.
Okay.
But it is like they're short stories in a
yeah.
in a
You
thing.
just go to the grocery store and buy like duck comics, like
And actually, they do have the Life and Times of Scrooge in there in hardback, still selling at like retail price, just everywhere. So
they love that. Like it's crazy. Like they love Don Rosa over there too, and it's funny because like he goes over to Europe and like he gets like thousands of people lining up to try to meet him and shake his hand, and he comes over here to the States and like nobody comes to his table except for like I don't know. I go to say hi. I'm horribly shy around.
And by say hi, you mean grovel at his feet, kiss his boots, and ask to bear his children, despite that being anatomically impossible.
Well, that's. I'm thinking that. I'm not doing that. But well, no, like I don't know. Like I'm really shy around people that like I admire artistically, and he's an awesome guy, and he's a great storyteller, and the times I have met him, he's been really nice, and he's given me chili peppers, which that's kind of that's a story in and of itself. But like, I got my first experience with a ghost pepper. Thanks to Don Rosa, and now because I have eaten Don Rosa's peppers, like I can eat just about anything now, so I can say that Rosa's chilies made a man out of me, but I digress.
Now I want to talk a bit about the artwork in this book. Based on everything I've read, It's my understanding that Rosa, throughout his entire career, took pains to be as close to Barks' art style as he could possibly be.
Yes. I think the huge difference between him and Carl Barks is that, I mean, both Barks and Rosa have a hand for detail when it comes to, like, backgrounds and locations. Rosa he loves, like, all the tiniest details on characters and props and, like, beard hair, like, you know, and like animals and straps, and I mean he loves history, he loves anthropology and architecture and all this other stuff, and you can see that in his work that he just takes, like, meticulous pains in recreating a lot of this stuff. I mean, and I think he gets a little more expressive with his ducks than, like, especially with, like, you don't really see the ducks cry too much in Carl Barks' run, because I mean back then they were primarily towards, like, little kids in the 50s. So they weren't really looking for that. But as Rosa, like, he has the advantage of having a more diverse audience, so he can explore, like, more emotions and different themes in his stories. So I'm not sure if it's fair to say he's better with emoting ducks than Barks is. I'm just thinking he's definitely had more opportunity to make them emote than Carl Barks has. Which a little aside on that too, if there's any, like, you know, I'm sure people who've read that Cracked article already know. Carl Barks is Osamu Tezuka, who is, like, the granddaddy of all manga, was a huge Carl Barks fan. And if you look at some of those old Carl Barks comics and you look at Tezuka's Astro Boy, you can see the obvious influence on his work. So, like, it's kind of a, you know, Carl Barks kind of helped, and Carl Barks and Scrooge McDuck and Donald Duck kind of helped to launch manga in the form that we enjoy it as today, thanks to Osamu Tezuka.
Yeah, apparently Tezuka and Barks also exchanged cards during Christmas.
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah, like, but yeah, it's especially obvious when you, like, if you, like, said, look, take an old Carl Barks duck comic and an issue of, and, like, a couple books of Astro Boy, and just compare the art, and you can see it's really cool. I like it a lot, especially since, like, I study this stuff very meticulously.
What about you guys, Kat, Brian? What about the artwork really stood out to you, if anything?
Well, the detailing of it was already sort of mentioned, though. But if you go back, if you remember the panel where I think he's saying, like, he's jumping up the air surrounded by, like, elephants and lions. Nobody double crosses Scrooge McDuck. If you look at that, it's well detailed. Like, the elephants, you can see the elephant muscle tones and, like, the lion muscle tones. It's a little cartoony in places, but that's perfectly all right. But in terms of just well organized, there's a lot of, like, the crowd shots too. I've sort of noticed when I was reading it, is like you go through when he's, like, surrounded by just bunch of people. There's all sorts of little details going on, small little jokes every so often, but you don't get lost. You can easily find your way back to where you're looking and how everything is sort of staged out. The Battle of Fort Duckburg versus the army. The detailing of the fort the fort's already fallen apart. So, but he draws it in such a way that it looks like if you blew on it, it would just tip over. You could have taken the easy way of being a fort, you know, a couple of cobwebs here and there. No, he took the extreme hard way, going, no, I want to make sure you realize how just terrible condition this fort is in, and how it's miraculously still standing after the army shows up, and Scrooge McDuck fights it off. And you never get lost. That's the best part. You never get lost in the artwork.
Yeah.
Not in it saying, like, it's not Where's Waldo, where your eyes cross every so often in case you can't find Waldo. I could find Scrooge McDuck.
You definitely get immersed in, like, you don't get lost in the sense that, like, it's done badly, but you do get, like, immersed in this world that he's created in this book, you know, just with all the details and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And what amazes me is that in almost any other story, this juxtaposition of almost photorealism in the landscapes and in objects and in animals, juxtaposed with a anthropomorphic duck with no pants, would look absolutely ridiculous. And yet, in this book, it all comes together and forms a very cohesive whole.
I want to take a little bit of time, because when I talk about comics, I know a lot of people talk about comics and artwork. We always sort of forget certain things, like, and a lot of it is color. You know, sometimes people don't realize how great color works in sort of bringing forth emotions or bringing forth a sort of scenery here. And this book goes kind of goes through all the different spectrums. Like when he's in the past, it's kind of a little dark and they're all poor and things like that. And as he gets sort of, his life goes on, the colors get a little bit brighter. And then it goes back a little bit to the darkness when he starts to kind of realize where his life has gone. And he even changes the colors of his feathers and under his eyes and stuff like that will change. And then we get sort of redeemed. And poof, it's all bright again. Like it's a lot. I know a lot of artists and a lot of colorists kind of do the quick and easy route, but here is definitely something where the color comes in and helps the story out even more as a storytelling element.
Yeah.
What I really enjoyed about this was that it doesn't matter what's going on in the scene and what kind of like drama is going on. There's always something going on in the background that's equally as interesting. And I'm thinking mostly of like Scrooge going around doing stuff and then his sisters in the background doing random things.
I gotta ask, and I think I know which answer you gave me. Which of Scrooge's sisters did you like more?
The crazy one.
Hortense, yep. That's what I thought.
I think everyone likes Hortense. Like, that's Donald's mom.
She's adorable.
And you get to see how Donald's parents meet, which is kind of cute.
That is pretty cute. And that's like kind of that stuff that's always, sort of like going on the side of the panel while like the main action is taking place. And then there's just random things happening off to the side, like somebody's getting mugged, and actually the way they're getting mugged is quite humorous. And it seems like whatever's going off to the side is always really interesting and really funny. And it helps to detract maybe from some of the more serious stuff or I don't know. I just think it's really fun, and it's, something a little bit extra going on, and you never feel like there's nothing happening.
It also makes multiple readings really worthwhile. So,
yes.
like the replay value, as you video game nerds would call it.
But now, again, the reason why we started the discussion about the life and times of Scrooge McDuck is recently something happened that I never anticipated ever happening, and that's we got a heavy metal concept album from, again, Tuomas Halpanian. I know I'm mispronouncing that right, and I apologize, of Nightwish, putting out this album of music inspired by the life and times of Scrooge McDuck. And I don't mean like, oh, this just influenced me and it's actually in practice is something completely unrelated. No, this is an actual life and times of Scrooge album with Scrooge McDuck on the cover. It's endorsed by Rosa and I would presume Disney as well, and it's out and it's amazing and it's fabulous.
Well, let's not go that far. Disney's a very weird company. They may not know it exists.
So
Europe, so the rights might be a little different, so who knows?
Yeah. But that was what galvanized us into this discussion, because we wanted to discuss the graphic novel and then the album and then the two of them together as a cohesive whole. So, Kabo, you've probably been looking forward to this the most. Tell us a little bit about the album and your thoughts on it.
Well, like, it kind of covers it. It doesn't. I was a little disappointed when I actually got it at first, because I thought it would be like each track would be like a chapter, and really it's not. It's definitely like things that kind of inspire moods and feelings, and it is kind of in chronological order. In terms of Scrooge Life, it starts off with, I was a lad in Glasgow, and then ends with, the more like, quiet, this is the end of my life kind of deal. It's not a straight soundtrack / adaptation or audio adaptation of Life and Times. It's mostly just, if I were to write songs that would fit these moments emotionally or narratively, then this is how it would sound. It's still amazing. There's several points in it where I can listen to it and just hear, or I can see those parts in the story that he's trying to express. Although I mentioned to you guys before we started here, I thought it was funny that the two was it Cold Heart to the Klondike and Last Flight to Dawson.
Last Flight to Dawson isn't even in the companion, and it's not in the original. It's like a complete side story that Don Rosa wrote.
Yeah.
So.
But so like you had these tracks that were actually from like the companion stories to Lifetime. So like that was kind of neat and interesting. They're gorgeous and I love them, but it's definitely not like a straight this is Life and Times. It's definitely like Scrooge inspired, I guess. I don't know.
It's kind of a soundtrack.
Yeah, I don't want to say inspired, because inspired doesn't give it enough credit, because it definitely is very clearly I am singing about Scrooge McDuck and his life. It's not like, here's the Spider-Man album of music inspired by whatever comic book movie is. No, it's actually straight.
My producer is telling me that the word you're looking for is anthology.
Yeah, it works. Okay. I like it. All right.
Now, Kat, you're a Nightwish fan from our college days together, so I'm interested to hear your opinions on this album first.
I squeed a lot. Just when I found out that it existed, before it came out, like that it was going to exist, and I'm like, that's a thing? I didn't think we could have things like that, because that sounds amazing, and we can't have nice things, can we? And so it just the idea of it's so ridiculous that it's amazing, because when you say it out loud, it's more like a Celtic rock album based on the life of Scrooge McDuck. And when you say that out loud and you put that into words and you try and explain it to other people, and they're just like, a what? About what?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, you just have to give it a shot. And it helps to already be a Nightwish fan, so you kind of know what kind of music you're getting into. But if you don't know Nightwish's music, it's definitely very different. Because, I mean, that's the kind of music I listen to every day in my car. But if you're not very well versed in some of the different subgenres of European rock, then it's gonna kind of, no matter what, it should totally blow you away, because it's so different than, you know, just your average rock album that we might have in the U.S.
It's very like operatic, I guess. Is that the word I'm looking for? Like,
well, yeah, because Nightwish is a symphonic metal band, so that there's a lot of opera and big orchestras and everything, and that's a lot of what you're getting out of this album. And it's amazing. It's just stunning. Everything about it is gorgeous and perfect.
So what was the track that stood out to you, particularly among the album?
Probably A Lifetime of Adventure. I think that one's like like a culmination of all of the other music, I guess. It's sort of like the end of the journey, and like reflecting on Scrooge's life all at once, and just sort of like the moral of the story is, you know, treasuring your first dime, and it's gorgeous. And they made a music video out of it, and I'm like, how did you even? But they did it.
Wait, they made a music video out of it?
well, like,
Dude!
This is news to me.
well, it was just them playing and like Don Rosa drawing stuff, right? It wasn't a straight up.
Yeah. They didn't like animate anything special for it.
Then I've seen that one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That song, at least to me, and I'm pretty sure, I'd be very surprised if this wasn't the case, but basically Lifetime of Adventure is that final page of the graphic novel where Scrooge is like, he's in his money bin and he's thinking about his life, and you know, and basically I'm picturing like the vignettes that they're showing on that page while the song plays, and those last few moments of the song where it does the, you know, where you have like that light choir coming in, and you know, and that door closes, like I almost hear that last line, like, because Donald has this bit where he's like, you know, they're looking at Scrooge and Donald's like, you know, all he has to show for his life is a vault filled with cold, meaningless metal, you know, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie responds like, we don't know, Uncle Donald, you might be wrong. And like, and those last 5 seconds of that song, I hear, and as usual, he was. You know, it's like, "Arr," and like, I'm a casual fan of Nightwish, but I'm a huge Scrooge McDuck fan and Life and Times, and like, I could like, you know, I could see these scenes in those songs, and it just, I was doing backflips.
Brian, what about you? What did you think?
Well, it's interesting because when we sort of discussed this, my mind went to the Proto-Men. Does everyone here know who the Proto-Men are?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for the folks at home, the Proto-Men are this sort of rock band that came together and sort of made a rock opera of Mega Man. But they didn't do like, here's is the rock opera of Mega Man 1. They have their own storyline to it. So when I heard about this album, I was like, is that going to be like the same thing or are they actually going to make an opera out of this and you know, vocalize some of the dialogue and things like that? And turns out nothing like that at all.
Although I'll tell you what, if they actually did make an opera about the life and times of Scrooge, man, you would find me at the New York Philharmonic in a fucking heartbeat.
I would pay whatever price.
I would spill the blood of a dozen men and a dozen more after that.
But no, I sort of agree. Like, when you get to listening to it, it is sort of that almost soundtracky sort of thing, following along with like the story. I tried to read and listen at the same time, but I did have trouble trying to keep up, because now that you say that there are things missing, that makes sense why I couldn't technically keep up.
Well, like, it's like I'm almost, after like listening to it, I'm hesitant to say that it's a soundtrack to the book itself, but it's definitely a soundtrack to Scrooge McDuck's life. So that totally works. But I wouldn't call it a straight up soundtrack to the graphic novel.
Exactly. It's that sort of weird in between area of where this music resides in, but it's fantastic music. I mean, I don't have, truth be told, and I may get slaughtered, I really don't listen to Nightwish at all. So I was unfamiliar going into it, but no, I really enjoyed everything about it. I wish it was a little bit longer. I would say that. I think 10 tracks is nice, but kind of want a little more.
Well, maybe if enough people buy this one, we'll get a companion album. Much as we got a companion book. What was your favorite track on the album, Brian?
It might be To Be Rich.
So Lifetime of Adventure?
Yeah, it's the same song.
Yeah.
Is it the same song? Because I have it under 2 different tracks.
No, it's 2 different tracks because Lifetime Adventure cuts off with the sleigh bells and then the chest closing, and then it goes into To Be Rich, where you hear like this girl kind of crying almost, and yes. It's a different track.
Okay,
I wasn't going nuts. And I know this is going to make me sound depressing, but that one I thought sort of hit real hard because that's where the idea of, that's where things turned really bad and really sour. And mostly because I even said at home going, man, if I had lots of money, I could really do some stuff. And then you kind of wonder going, well, if I have lots of money, what's that going to make me? And so that sort of concept sort of hit a little bit closer to home than I thought it was actually going to when it first started. Put that honestly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's also one of my favorites of the album. That again, like that beginning part where the singer is again almost crying. I can envision the panels where Scrooge is just holding the snow globe and kind of like zooms in on his spectacles and he's just like whispering Goldie and it's just like
having the Citizen Kane moment.
Yeah, that was very, very Citizen Kane.
Yes. Well, he is a huge fan of Citizen Kane, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about, like, because we were talking about how, like, money corrupts and how, like, and I always thought it was interesting, like, a lot of the stories about rich characters, in Karl Barks' day, and even, like, and almost into the 80s, like, you would have these, like, rich characters. I'm mega rich, and I'm using my money to go on adventures and do this, and Yahoo, and being rich is awesome. And with Scrooge stories, it was always interesting because his money and his quest for money it brings him trouble, like for him and his family. Like it's never like his money is never really. It's always a what's the word I'm looking for?
A double-edged sword.
Well, it's a liability. It's like more often than not, his money is a liability than it is a boon, and mostly because like his whole thing was just getting it and having it. It's not so much what he can do with it. Always getting more and never quite being happy and having it like cause so much trouble,
That also touches on the subject that Scrooge is an adventurer. He's mostly getting the gold for a while just because he wants to go on an adventure.
And then when it becomes more about the gold than it does the adventure, that's when
When it starts going downhill.
Yeah.
One of the things that always struck me about Scrooge as a character, and it's amazed me that it's usually been pretty consistent based on whenever he shows up, whether it's in the comics or on DuckTales, the cartoon series, is that, Scrooge is obsessed with money, and he's always going on adventures to try and get more money. But when the chips are down, he's always put his family first. If Huey, Dewey, and Louie are in danger, he's always like, oh, what's this? I've got a 12-pound gold nugget. Oh, fuck that. I've got to save my nephews. And it was interesting to see sort of where the germ of that came from, that he wasn't always like that, that was actually the result of a lesson he learned in falling out with his own family.
Yeah. But
we're kind of getting off track. We're going back to the character, and we're still on the album. For me, my favorite track was actually the very first one, Glasgow, 1877. Just that big, booming, bombastic music. It really made me feel like, hey, there's adventure beyond compare to be found. I know that's Gummy Bears, not DuckTales, so sue me. But it made me really feel like that even sitting in my car, getting ready to go to work, that I was getting ready to head out on a grand adventure.
That was my thought of Into the West. Is that the right one? Am I thinking the right song?
Possibly.
It's the one that basically covers his time, like being like a cowboy, and it has that kind of Western movie, like dun 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 dun. Definitely, I definitely feel that, like, yes, let's go on an adventure,
So would you say that this album is really more of a supplement to the original book?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, it's more of a soundtrack to Scrooge's life than it is to the actual book. You definitely get more enjoyment out of it. Still, like, it's solid music from beginning to end. If you just listen to it, it's great. But like, if you know more about Duck lore, know more about Scrooge McDuck, then you really get a lot out of. You get a lot more out of it. I do recommend, if you like the album, definitely like check out the books because it makes the experience 10 times better.
Now let's talk a little bit about the influence that this book has had, not just on Scrooge McDuck as a character, but on canon as a whole. I recently acquired the entire DuckTales TV series, and I'm watching these cartoons, and I'm noticing all these little touches from characters that show up, stories that Scrooge tells, particularly the episode where he recounts his time in Scotland. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, did they take this from Life and Times? Was this influenced by Don Rosa?
Well, actually, truth be told, it's Carl Barks, and since Don Rosa took directly from Carl Barks, that's why. I always tell people though, like DuckTales is it's like baby's first Carl Barks story. So like it's kind of got those Carl Barks comic elements to it, but it doesn't quite have the same impact. Like a real honest to goodness Carl Barks Duck story in animation would feel like an Indiana Jones movie in tone and in scale and everything. And DuckTales it's good and especially for little kids and for people who are trying to introduce to the world of Scrooge McDuck and Carl Barks comics, it's great. But I do recommend people like, dude, if you like that, you need to read the comics.
But now, what's amazed me is how consistent throughout each of these portrayals Scrooge's character is. There's very little deviation to the core that Barks established and Rosa, I guess, codified for a new audience. You know, we were talking about how, yes, Scrooge is obsessed with money, but when push comes to shove, he's always put his family first. And that's the thing that I've always found really compelling about Scrooge. He's greedy, yes, but he's not so greedy that it overrides everything else in his life.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, he had that moment where he was, and then he paid for it. So, you know, he learned that lesson. And, you know, there were many years of solitude after that where that served as penance for what he had done. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Donald saved him.
What about you guys? Do you have anything to add to that or comment on that?
Yeah, I kind of sort of hit the nail on the head, is that it is a great influence, but it's an influence of more of everything that sort of came with it and towards it. I kind of wish that they had the DuckTales like comic book that Boom Studios had. I wish they sort of continued that a little bit longer, but unfortunately, it was unable to. Unfortunately, while those stories were kind of good, it didn't sort of. I don't think they lived up to what they could have come before it. Unfortunately, I've only read a couple of those. I've read most of the Darkwing Duck book.
Yeah. Well, I will say that as a Carl Barks fan, and then watching DuckTales after getting into the Barks books, it bothers me immensely that Scrooge has a butler and a maid or a nanny and stuff, because he would never spend that money on that. He would I'll clean my own house. I don't care. I'll get robots built or something, but only if they're really low maintenance and don't cost much. He would not pay a human being to stay in his house and clean it for him. He's just too much of a tightwad. And he certainly wouldn't pay, he wouldn't pay someone else to drive him around. He wouldn't pay anyone else to fly him full time if he could, smuggle himself into some crates and go, be taken to the Galapagos Islands that way.
This is something I have to tell people who, they look at Scrooge McDuck and go, well, why is he the good guy? He's a penny-pinching asshole. And the thing that a lot of people tend to forget or not realize when looking at Scrooge McDuck is he's a penny pincher in that he doesn't believe in luxuries, either for his employees or even for himself. But it's said several times in the comics that I've read that he pays his employees very generous wages. He's just not going to spring for, an extra lump of coal for the fire.
He's not going to spring for luxuries for himself. He's not going to, the fancy this and that, or he'll make sure that the people he needs are taken care of, but he's not going to want a butler. That's just it's not Scrooge at all. At least not Barks Scrooge. But
yeah. He's also not an asshole boss like so many. You see so many CEOs who are just like, I eat babies and wipe my butt with my employees' kids' college funds. Scrooge is, a very human, if I may use that term on an anthropomorphic duck character, and a very compassionate one to his workers and the people around him.
He's fair, but he's still kind of an a-hole.
He doesn't expect any more or any less from anyone else that he wouldn't expect from himself.
But this guy also fought off an army. I fought off an army. Obviously, you can do this work. No, I can't.
You're a softie.
I Samsoned an entire steamboat. You should be able to do the same. I'm not joking about that, by the way. He actually does pull a Samson. They've got him chained to 2 of the smokestacks, and he finally just gets pissed off and just rips them out of their foundation.
Don't fuck with McDuck.
Scrooge McDuck is amazing, and everybody should learn more about Scrooge McDuck.
I've been sitting here in complete and total silence this entire conversation thinking, why in the world have I not read this? This sounds amazing!
Alright. Well, so I guess that's about covered all the ground that we can with this. I guess we'll start wrapping up. So, final thoughts on Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck.
Greatest book ever written.
Go read it right now.
Alright, Kat, Brian?
What they said.
Yeah, what they said.
All right. So I guess I'll parrot that sentiment by saying Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, both the graphic novel and the album. If you've not read it or if you've not listened to it, go seek them out and discover these amazing, amazing stories. And now, as is our custom when we have a guest on the show, Kabo, now this is your time to tell us about some upcoming projects that you have working on, some stuff that you want to pimp and promote.
Wow, what are we? Well, right now it's mostly we're wrapping up, and I think I told you this during the anniversary show, we're wrapping up Benson Sue. So Crisis in Infinite Sues will be, it's going to be posting on the website till December, but the book should be available for Otakon. For those of us who see us at conventions, we're actually completely redesigning our booth for our appearance at Otakon this year. We'll be in the dealer's room. If you want to find us, like there's actually there's a vendor who plays really loud unce music and sells swords. So follow the
I hate that guy.
Look for the swords. We're going to be right behind him. Hopefully not trying to like commit ritual suicide. So yeah. Other than that, go to Interbank Studios. I'm still updating I'm My Own Mascot on a fairly regular basis, and doing the con circuit. The next one I'll be at will be Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina, with Don Rosa. So yeah, come and see us there, and then after that we'll be at Fan Expo Toronto. So any Canadian listeners, and Otacon's gonna be the big one in July, and yeah, we'll be around. So check out our website, Interbank Studios. We have a convention section, so if you want to actually meet us in person, feel free. Obviously, Sammy too. We tend to work pretty hard at the table. So yeah, thank you guys.
All right. And that about wraps it up for Nerd of the Third Power this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm the cat.
I'm Brian.
I'm John, and I look forward to contributing nothing next time as well.
All right.
I'm going.
Kabo, thank you as always for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you back. We'll have to have you on more often.
Always, I miss you guys.
And we'll see you next week. Taka, play us out.
Arrivederci.